The East Coast has seen a 25% increase in the number of extreme precipitation days since the 1950s. Rise in sea levels will increase the risk of flooding and storm surges, which can lead to coastal erosion, destruction of property, and loss of life. Climate change and its effects on the East Coast of the United States. Hello, I am Joshua Wells. These two quotes have led me to today's research question: to what extent has industrialization negatively impacted coastal communities in the East Coast of the United States of America in the 21st century? I have come to the conclusion that the burning of fossil fuels has caused global temperatures to rise, leading to an increase in extreme weather phenomena, such as droughts and heat waves. Increased flooding and sea level rise have caused coastal communities to suffer, destroying homes, businesses, and infrastructure. In Urban Evolution, How Species Adapt to Survive in Cities, Eric Bender mentions that impoverished neighborhoods tend to have higher temperatures, greater exposure to all pollutants, and other environmental disadvantages, clearly showing there is a correlation between temperatures increasing and increasing in pollution. Early in spring of 2021, the NOAA, also known as the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, focused on the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the ocean, atmosphere, and related ecosystems. They released the 1991 to 2020 U.S. climate normals, the new official baseline for describing average U.S. climate. Climate.gov has produced a collection of maps showing what counts on normal temperature and precipitation for the United States has changed over the past century. Now we've doubled back to make maps not of change, but simply the new annual average temperature and precipitation across the United States. Shown with the data provided by the EPA, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, since 1901, the average surface temperature has risen an average rate of 0.17 Fahrenheit per decade. Average temperatures have risen more quickly since the late 1970s, 0.32 to 0.55 Fahrenheit, shown from this increase here to the second half over here. 9 of the top 10 warmest years on record for the contiguous of the 48 of the states have occurred since 1998 and 2012 and 2016 were the 2 warmest years on record as of early 2022. The average heat wave season in the 50 cities in this indicator is about 49 days longer than it was in the late 1960s. Timing can matter, as heat waves that occur earlier in the spring or later in the fall can catch people off guard and increase exposure to health risks associated with heat waves, as shown on the top left here, where the heat wave frequency has almost quadrupled since the 1960s, from 2 heat waves per year up to 7. Sea level rise. The United States Environmental Protection Agency created this illustration showing how sea levels have rose almost 10 inches since 1875. This data was recorded using satellite measurements and tide gauges, providing a clear indication of sea levels rising over the years. Global sea levels are rising as a result of human-caused global warming, with the recent rates being unprecedented, from up to over 200 millimeters from the 1900s all the way to the late 2019. The second graph, which is from coastal tide gauge and satellite data provided by NASA, shows how much sea level changed from about 1900 to 2018. Items with positive symbols are factors that cause global sea level increase, while negative symbols are what causes the sea level to decrease. These items are displayed at the time they were affecting the sea level, showing the large increases from 0 all the way to about 200 all the way in 2020. Effects of sea level rise. The illustration displays the levels of risk sea level rise poses along the U.S. southeastern coastlines, taking into consideration adaptation measurements. The coastal vulnerability index used here is based on tidal range, wave height, coastal slope, shoreline change, landform, and processes, and the historical rate of the relative sea level rise. As shown, the entirety of the eastern front has a vulnerability to rising sea levels, with the darker regions being the highest, shown near New Orleans and Virginia Beach. Of the 50 areas in this illustration, 46 experienced a statistically increase in heat wave frequency between the 1960s and 2020. However, duration has increased significantly in 29 of these locations, shown on the red circles provided on the illustration. The length of the heat waves in 44 and intensity in 17. While absolute sea level has increased steadily overall, particularly in recent decades, regional trends vary and absolute sea level has decreased in some places. My solutions consist of governmental implementation of new policies to find alternatives to reduce emissions, reduction of burning of fossil fuels, and investment in infrastructure that can compensate and withstand the rising sea levels that damage the cities around the sea levels being risen from. Support from political parties would be needed from both sides, liberal and democratic, or Republican and Democratic, as this is a national issue and not only in not only in a specific party. Major funding is also going to be required throughout the entire United States for funding of the infrastructure and finding alternatives to the reduction of burning of fossil fuels, because without funding you cannot find better alternatives that will be cheaper. Is my work cited? Any questions?
Two questions. How did you select the strategies that you use to gather information?
Initially, I used most of my peers, and I was asking people for any ideas or help on. Can you repeat the question?
How did you select the strategies you use to gather information?
Initially, I asked other people for advice on strategies, such as reviewing the same sources or looking at the broad sources that are publicly used. But then I decided to go to online sources and view what most other people have done beforehand and follow mainly what they used in studying and collecting information.
All right, and what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
Could you repeat the question?
What advice would you have for other researchers that consider this topic?
My advice is to collect more data from broader sources and more sources that include organizations that research more deeper into climate change, especially in smaller parts of regions such as rural cities and urban areas. And that's it.